Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you for being here with us this evening. I'm live from my home office right now, so if there's any weird sounds, I am sorry, but I made everything right, so there's no weird sound going on with the cats and dogs and whatnot. So first and foremost, I am Vincent Roy, and I'm your host for this webinar. I'm from the Conseil Régional Environnement Gaspésie-Île-de-la-Madeleine, so I'm on the other side on the Gaspé Peninsula. And we want to invite you to write any and all questions you may have in the Q&A space below throughout the evening. So we'll try to answer them and we'll guide you to other resources if we don't know the answer to your questions right now. So this is the Introduction to Electric Vehicles webinar. It's presented to you by the Conseil Régional de l'Environnement et du Développement Durable de l'Outaouais, CREDO, and is offered as part of Running Electric. It's a campaign to raise awareness and promote the use of electric vehicles across Quebec. EQTA was commissioned by the Transition Énergétique Quebec Tech to coordinate this campaign in partnership with stakeholders in the field of transportation electrification and sustainable mobility. The webinar speakers tonight is Monsieur Simon-Pierre Rioux, President of the Quebec Electric Vehicle Association. Mr. Rioux, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. This is an English webinar that will be talking about electric vehicles. I'm more than happy to answer any and all questions. It's always going to be a pleasure. It makes it a little bit more interesting. So please do ask questions. Don't wait. It's going to be a lot more interesting for everybody because electric cars are pretty complicated sometimes, and I'll try to make it as easy as possible for you, especially if you're looking to buy into an electric car or you have any questions. It'll be my pleasure to answer them. So go ahead and do ask questions as we go along. You can ask questions in French and in English. On peut faire ça bilingue aussi, not a problem. So I'd like to thank Écoutaire and the government of Quebec for helping out in this education program campaign, and Transition Énergétique Québec is one of the partners for Running Electric. Thank you, Vincent, for the introduction. Now, people that might be thinking, he's talking way too fast, I don't understand what he's talking about, or anything like that. If you have any questions, everything that I'll be talking about today is available on our online guides at www.aveq.ca. So that's Association des Véhicules Électriques du Québec, aveq.ca. And today we'll be talking about electric cars. So we'll be talking about the green license plate and also about charging stations and where to install a charging station, all these things. So first of all, there's different types of electric cars, but what is an electric car in the first place? Super easy. It's a car that needs to be plugged in to charge its battery. So if you find a charging port somewhere along on the electric car, then you know that it's all electric. If there's no charging port, that means that the electricity being used is basically generated by braking, so regenerative braking. And at that time, it's you know that it's only a hybrid car. Electric car needs to have an independent battery that can be charged from outside sources. There are three types of electric cars. There is all electric, so fully electric, 100% electric. Some of those cars that are well known are the Nissan Leaf, the Chevrolet Spark, all the Teslas are fully electric. They don't have any gas in them. BMW i3, the Kia Soul, etc., that do offer 100% electric cars. An extended range electric cars, not many of them in that category. The Chevrolet Volt, which used to be very popular, is still the most popular electric car in Quebec. But is no longer produced. There's the BMW i3 with the Rex, with the range extender, and the Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid. And then there is just standard plug-in hybrid electric cars. There's a lot of them. There's about 20 of them. They don't offer that much range, electric range overall. So let's go into a little bit more details about that. All electric cars are mostly known for their electric powertrain, which is consists of one very large battery, a big, strong electric motor, and a charging port. And it's pretty much it. Those are like computers on wheels. It's all electric, no gas whatsoever. Most of the vehicles now on the road, the 2019, 2020 models offer over 385 kilometers of range, and the 2021 models are starting to offer over 410 kilometers of range. So it's, you know, bit by bit, year by year, there's like huge changes. I remember when I first bought my car back in 2013, the biggest range you could get was 160 kilometers. So we've gone far, and there's been big changes in technology since that time. The only car that has had always a large battery since the get-go were the Teslas, which were much more expensive cars than a Nissan Leaf, for example. But how do you charge up that battery? Well, there's two different ways. Either with regenerative braking. So when you slow down the vehicle, instead of using mechanical brakes, the motor inverts its the positive and negative, and instead of outputting energy, it takes in the energy and transforms it into electricity. And that's one way to recharge battery. It's not an infinite form to recharge a battery. So let's say that you go up a hill and it takes you 3 kilowatt hour to go up the hill. When you go down, you might get back 30% of that power that was expended to go up the hill. So it's not 100% that you'll get back into the battery. And the other way, of course, you got charging stations to put power in that battery. Extended range electric vehicles have a medium-sized battery, and they got a smaller gas engine with a small gas tank. So the gas tanks offer maybe 25 liters of gas, and that's it, because you're not supposed to be running these cars only on gas. Most of the time you're supposed, or you're forced by the car to charge it up. So as soon as you're out of gas, it will tell you charge the battery instead of saying put more gas in the car. And that's how they do. Most of these cars offer between 80 and 160 kilometers of range. So it's a good mid-step, because with 80 kilometers of range, you can usually do your whole day when you just go around the city. And then if you do longer trips, then you can use the gas engine, which often just charges up the battery, or it can also give a little bit of power to the wheels, but most of the power goes from the electric motor into the wheels. And then the plug-in hybrids, which have a very, very small battery and a very large gas tank. So those cars are mostly powered by the gas engine, and any power that needs to be given to the wheels, if you accelerate a little bit quicker than usual, then you'll notice that it's the gas engine that kicks in to give some power to the wheels. And when you're at lower speeds, then it's the electric motor that will give the power. So 10 to 40 kilometers of range, that basically means you're not going very far. If you're going to work, most of the time you'll need to plug your car at work so you can go back home on electricity. So this is just like a baby steps to be able to like get the feel of how electric cars work, but most of the time you'll be running with gas. So that's a choice that you have to make now. Should you go all electric or with a plug-in hybrid? Depends on what type of car you're looking for, what size you're looking for also. But you have to look at your needs for sure. So now that you're thinking about it, you're thinking, okay, well, I have a good idea. Yeah, Vincent.
You have a question right now. So a question from Sandrine. How can you make sure you pick a car with the right range?
Well, That's a good question. You have to look at your daily routine. You have to look at how much range you need during the day. And then you can double it, because if you live in Lac Saint Jean with minus 30, minus 40 degrees temperature, and we'll talk about that later about winter, but it makes a difference. You should look at it not only from the point of view of your daily routine, especially if it's your last or it's your only car. You have to think about what's my usual trips that I do on a regular basis. So you might only do 60 kilometers of range of traveling every day to go to work and come back. But once a week, you go to your cottage, which is 150 kilometers away. So you have to think about that. So if you do go to your cottage on a regular basis, or you're traveling around the city a lot during the day, you might want to get a car that has enough range to fill that up, plus 40%, because during really, really cold winters, you might need to consider that your battery will also be the source of energy to warm up the car. So
Okay.
we'll be talking about that a little bit later.
Sure.
Now,
Thank
once you
you.
decide what type of car you chose, or you're comfortable with, um, you'll be going to the dealership, and you'll look at the price of the cars, and you'll think, oh, it's a lot more expensive than I thought. Because yes, having an electric car, since they don't produce them in very large quantities, large numbers, then of course these cars are going to be a little bit more expensive than expected, than the same type of car, but gas car. So that's why we have federal and provincial governmental incentives to try and reduce the price and the accessibility of these cars. If you go for an all electric vehicle, you'll get up to $13,000 in government rebate and incentives, so you can reduce the price. Most of the cars have between $15,000 and $20,000 extra than their gas counterpart when you choose to go electric. So the incentive helps take a load off of that extra cost, but it's not fully taken out. So you might still have a little bit of an extra cost. We'll look at that a little bit later. If you go and choose a used car, you're allowed $4,000 in incentive from the provincial government. Of course, this means that this incentive will only be given to you if you buy the car from a dealership. If you buy it from small ads like Kijiji or a Facebook marketplace, you're not going to be able to get that incentive. But most people that sell their car also try to balance out the fact that if you don't have an incentive, but you're buying from a particular person, the price is going to be adjusted. So overall, whether you get the incentive or not, it's going to be a similar price. Extended range electric vehicles also get $13,000 of rebate if they have a battery that's 16 kilowatt hours or more. So that battery gives you about 60 to 80 kilometers of range. If you don't have a 16 kilowatt hour battery or more, then you're not allowed to have the $13,000. You get $6,500 like most plug-in hybrids. So smaller the battery, the lesser the incentive, because the lesser the cost should be, but those plug-in cars can be pretty expensive. So you really need to look at it. Another thing that's super important is the top price, the limit of the cost of the car. In Quebec, your cost, the limit, the MSRP, manufacturer retail, suggested retail price, sorry, is $60,000. If your car is worth more than $60,000, you're not going to get the incentive. Same thing with the federal government. The car at a minimum can cost $45,000 and to a maximum of $55,000. It's a little bit tricky on the federal side. So it means that a Chevrolet Bolt that's $44,900 at its base price is available, has access to the $5,000. And if you get a Chevrolet Bolt Premium, that's $54,000, you'll still get the $5,000 from the federal government. If you, because it's below $55,000 and there is a base model available under $45,000. They made it super complicated. Like a Tesla Model 3. Tesla is making available Model 3 below $45,000, but they don't want you to buy it. They just made this model that gives you 150 kilometers of range, which is absolutely horrible. And they tell you, we can't change that. If you buy it, you keep it at that range. But you know, they want to sell you like the standard range that they have, which is now the 2021 model is 423 kilometers. But it's below 55,000, but there is a base model at 45,000 that they won't want you to buy. So overall, you can get access to the federal government incentive. If you want to buy like a BMW i8, which is a sports car, or a Tesla Model X, that's very expensive. You will not get anything from the provincial and federal government. If you do lease the car, you need to have at least a minimum 4 years lease, but the dealership will let you know ahead of time that if you want to go for anything lower than 4 years, you're not going to get the full amount. So it's important to know. Hope everyone is okay on that so far. Now, so you chose what type of car you want. You went to the dealership and you know that there's an incentive to bring the price down to an acceptable level. And then you're faced with what I was faced with back in 2013. There's no availability. In 2020, some manufacturers are doing great strides and great efforts to make sure that you will have access to electric cars. And like Chevrolet, Tesla, Volkswagen now do have some available cars in most dealerships. So you can choose the color, pay it up, and leave with the car within a few days. So that's great. A lot of other manufacturers, especially the Korean and the Koreans mostly, you're going to have a hard time. You'll need to be on a waiting list. So if you're looking at buying a car now, do look at it from the point of view that you'll need to have access to putting yourself on a waiting list for a little while. It might be a month, might be 6 months. Volkswagen for a while was over a year waiting list, and now they've done a lot of efforts in order to bring the cars and get rid of that waiting list because it was unacceptable. There's a zero emissions mandate in Quebec that says that manufacturers need to offer a minimum amount of cars to the market, to the consumers, and it's like a certain percentage of their whole sales. And if they do not, they need to pay up to between $5,000 and $20,000 in fines for every car not sold. So they do bring a certain minimum, but the zero emissions mandate is not very contraignant. It's not very strong. So they're supposed to be changing it for the year 2021 to make it have a little bit more bite in order to make sure that people will have access to these cars easier. So have more pressure on demand on the inventory. Same thing, plug-in hybrids also. Yes.
I have a short question here. We've seen on social media right now, the Lucid Air company that's doing cars with very big range. Actually, it's like about 800 kilometers. Will those, even if they're sports car, be able to be joined with the federal programs and provincial programs? If you know,
not at all. It has nothing to do if it's a sports car or not a sports car. It's for the Quebec, it's above $60,000. And for the federal government, there's no car that starts at $4,500 from Lucid. So these cars are luxury cars, you know, over 100 grand. So if you're going to buy a car at $100,000, I think you're able to afford it without an incentive, basically.
You're probably right. Thank you.
So now that you got your car and you bought it, you might think, okay, there's a green license plate. If you hadn't noticed, electric cars in Quebec and in Ontario as well have a green license plate instead of the blue writing. The reason is simply to differentiate the electric cars, but you need to be aware that it gives you some certain advantages. For example, you're allowed to go into reserved lanes. You have access to certain péage. Also, the ferries across St. Lawrence, most of them will give you free access to the car when you use those traversiers, the ferries. And certain cities, except the major cities, will offer you free parking. Now, it's important to know that to have access to reserved lanes, you cannot simply just go into a reserved lane and drive in it, because most of those are for buses and taxi. Only if there's a green logo of an electric car that you can go into them, or else you will get fined. And I get emails regularly from people saying that they got a fine, and how come? Because, you know, they've got an electric car and they're allowed to drive everywhere they want, but that's not really the case. So you need to make sure that that little green logo is there into the reserved lane panel. To go into those specific highways like the A30 and the A25 and go through the toll booth without paying, it's not just because you have a green license plate that you can go free. They will send you that bill at the end of the month if you don't have the transponder. Now, you need to get a free transponder. You just go to the website of A25 or A30 Express and you ask for the free electric car transponder. And then once you have it and it's installed and you go through the toll booths, you will be able to go there, go cross it for free, which is really interesting for a lot of people that they take those roads. Whereas for the ferries, it's only the car that gets free access. Any people inside the car need to pay for their right-of-way. Where can you charge your electric car? That's always a good question, because once you got that electric car, you can no longer stop at that Petro-Canada station close to your house or on the highway. Especially if you have a 100% electric vehicle, you're kind of stuck. So where do you charge your car? Most of the time, 90% of the time, you'll be charging your car at home or at work. Now you might be wondering, why am I talking about at work? Simply because most people, if they rent an apartment, they're not going to really spend money to install a charging station. Maybe they don't have a parking with some sort of a power outlet available close by. So they could be charging at home, at work. And how would that work? Well, there's a government program called Branché au Travail, Plugged at Work, that offers your employer $5,000 for buying a charging station and installing it. And if they want to have multiple charging stations, let's say they want to get 5 of them, well, they'll get $20,000 back from the government, from the provincial government, in order to install those cars. In exchange, they will offer free electricity for 2 years to people using those charging stations from the start of the installation. So it's a pretty nice incentive, and it allows people that rent apartments to be able to charge their electric car. So very, very nice. There are other ways of charging electric car if you do rent. There are charging stations in major cities that are on the road, on side of the street. You could also be using fast charging station. So maybe once a week, you'll go to a fast charging station and you'll plug it in for 20, 30, 40 minutes and charge up your whole car, and it'll be good to go for another 400 kilometers of range. And it's important because, you know, in 2035, there will be no more sales of gas cars in the province. So we need to be ready. We need to already think about what's going to be happening, how we're going to be charging those electric cars for anyone, whether you own a home or whether you rent an apartment. It's super important to understand that you will need to be able to charge that car. So a lot of things are happening, and cities will be installing more and more charging stations so that people that rent will not be stuck. So there are different types of charging station. Every single car, electric car, comes with a free charging station, which is usually a 120 volt charging station. It's a very slow charge, but you know, it helps. If you have a very small battery, for example, if you have a plug-in hybrid, a lot of the owners of these cars don't even install a big charging station at home. They just use the outdoor 120 volt outlet, and they just plug it straight in, because a small battery during the night, it'll be enough to charge it up completely. If you have a 100% electric car, you might be charging that car for like 2 or 3 days before it's fully charged. If it was at 0%, if you just, you know, you have a big battery, but you only use 30 kilometers a day, of course, during the night, you'll be able to charge it up with 120 volts. But, you know, since we're getting to that point where we will be using these electric cars for, you know, a lifetime now, they're not going away for sure. There is an incentive from the government of $600 to be able to buy and install a charging station at home or at your condo. And if you are doing that, might as well, you know, have that incentive. So charging station, 120 volt, you can use it and charge at any time. If you go to somebody's house and they don't have a charging station, well, you could plug it up. If you're going there for like the weekend to see some family members that don't have charging stations, you can use that small charging station. On the way there, you could use a fast charging station, 400 volts, to charge it up during the trip. So, you know, whether you charge 120 volts or 240 volts, it's still going to be the same cost. So whether you charge faster or slower at home, it's still the same price, and you'll be using the same amount of electricity to charge up that battery. And for like a Chevrolet Bolt or a Tesla Model 3, which are the most popular fully electric cars on the market, the Nissan Leaf as well, it'll cost about $4.50, $5 to charge up the whole car. And that's like the cheapest way to charge a car. You can also charge on the street at 240 volts. That's $1 per hour. So for a 60 kilowatt hour battery, you might be charging 5 to 6 hours on that. So it's a little bit more expensive. And if you use a super fast charging station at 400 volts, you will be paying $11.78 per hour. And that's the tariff is per minute. So if you only use 10 minutes, you're not going to be charged for a whole hour. You'll be paying for like $1.78, $2 overall. Now, the cars, you can use them up. Like for the whole life of my electric car since 2013, I've always charged outdoors, because some people have that question. Do I need a garage to charge an electric car? Is that dangerous? Is there any problem? Can it like start going up in flames and burning up? No, not a problem whatsoever. Whether you keep the car outdoors and it's minus 30, that car will start without a hitch, without a problem. If you keep the car indoors in a heated garage, it will also work very well. Maybe I think in the early like 2011, 2012, there have been stories of charging stations that caught up on fire. So that has happened. Is that a danger nowadays? Are we supposed to be afraid of that? A lot of the charging stations that are made in Quebec are made extremely well. They're very sturdy. They're made for our climate. And as long as you have it installed by a professional electrician, there will not be any trouble. People that have tried to be cheap and install the charging station themselves may have run into problems, because if you use a wire that's not adapted to the extreme load and power that's going through that wire, the wire will overheat and it will go up in flames. So you need to have a large power electrical wire to be able to do that. Electricians know what they're doing. One funny story about that is when I had my first charging station installed at home, the electrician was like so excited. He's like, wow, this is my first charging station that I install. It's amazing. It's so cool. And we installed it directly. Like the wire came out from the power box, and it was just a wire that plugged into the charging station, because you can also have a plug, like a NEMA plug, which is the same as you'll have find for your electrical dryer or your electrical oven. If you do that, you can plug in and out, and of course that outlet has power. If you put your fingers in it, you can shock yourself. But if you have it directly wired into the charging station, then there's no trouble, no danger for anyone. But what I did, I said, oh, I'll try the charging station just to make sure that it works well. So I take the plug and I just put it on my tongue directly, like you do for a 9-volt battery. And the electrician just yells out, no, don't do that. You'll electrocute yourself. It's 240 volts. And I said, no, it's not. The charging station and the car communicate together. And it's like a 2-volt or 3-volt communication pattern. And once the charging station and the car say, yes, there is a proper link, it's plugged in properly, then the 240 volt goes through. If there's not that link, you can touch the charging port or the charging gun for the charging from the charging station. There's no 240 volt, there's nothing going through it, so you can't electrocute yourself. So the other one that I was talking about is the big charging station here, which is 400 volt, and eventually with time they'll get to 800 volt. You get different powers. You can get a 50 kilowatt power charging station. Some of them are 100. There's new ones at IGA that will be installed across the province that are starting at 150 kilowatt. What does it all mean? It's the speed and the power that's being put through to your car. And it depends if your car is allows to accept that much power. So if I have a Chevrolet Bolt, let's take that one for example, or even a Nissan Leaf, the new Nissan Leaf Plus. If you plug the Nissan Leaf Plus, and the battery is 60 kilowatt hours, if you plug it into a 50 kilowatt charger, it'll take about 55 minutes to charge it completely. Of course, you never charge a car with fast charging station to 100%. You charge it to 80%, because after 80%, it slows down to a crawl to protect the battery, and you're just paying the same price to charge up the car, even though it's like trickle charging it. The same thing happens with your cell phone, by the way. But if you take a 100 kilowatt charging station on that Nissan Leaf Plus, the Nissan Leaf will accept 100 kilowatt and it will charge like at twice the rate for a certain amount of time. So it'll charge up a lot faster. But if you plug that 100 kilowatt bad charger onto a very old Nissan Leaf, it's not going to charge it any faster. It's going to charge it at 50 kilowatt because the old Nissan Leafs only accepted 50 kilowatt of power and a little bit less. So there's two things. There's the power that the charger can output and the power that your car can accept to do a fast charging. The goal with those fast charging stations in the next few years, already the Porsche Taycan allows it at 800 volts. It allows fast charging to from 20 to 80% in about 10 minutes. So we're aiming to have a charging session to be as fast as filling up a gas tank with some petrol. So it's very exciting to see all these changes in technology and to know that pretty soon we'll be able to charge up an electric car as fast as we can fill up a car with gas. Hope there's no questions. Now, are there a lot of charging stations? Yes, there are. Absolutely. So you could go on different websites that register all these charging stations like chargehub.com. If you go on plugshare.com, you'll see all the charging stations from the different manufacturers. And one thing that's really interesting, if you look at it, it's all across Quebec, New Brunswick, all the different states, Ontario. So you can travel all across North America with those. And some of them have a little T. That's for Tesla. So Tesla has a specific connector to charge up their cars. And if you look on this fast charging stations, you see there's two cables on the left and on the right. The left one is to charge up Japanese and Korean cars. And the right one is to charge up European and North American cars. You cannot charge two of those cars on that same charging station. It's only one or the other. And you cannot charge a Tesla car on those because the connector is different. If you want to use them anyway, you need an adapter that Tesla sells separately for about $500 to use the CHAdeMO. But the fast charging stations at from Tesla, which are called superchargers, do charge up to 250 kilowatt, which is like very, very fast. So the big batteries on the Tesla cars can charge up much faster than any other type of vehicles. So like I was saying, you'll find a variety of charging stations across the province and across North America. The orange ones are the fast charging stations that are mostly along highways, and you got the normal 240 volt charging stations here and there. You can see there's a green circle, which means the charger is available. If you're getting there, you probably won't find any cars charging at that time. If there's a red circle, it means that there is somebody charging. You might have to wait a little bit. So it's really interesting. It's like live previews on how the charging stations are being used. And another thing that's important to know, back in my day, which is not that far, like back in 2013 when we first started, there were no fast charging stations. And eventually with time, it installed more and more, but they only installed like one every 60 kilometers in the province, which meant sometimes you would have 5 cars arriving for one charging station, and you'd have to wait a long time to be able to charge up. Nowadays, they don't do that anymore. They do like Tesla. Tesla, from the get-go, as soon as they had a place to put charging stations, they wouldn't just put one charging station. They'd put like 8 or 16 or 32 all in one shot, because they knew that with time, they'd be selling more cars and those charging stations would be in great demand. And we're doing that now with the standard charging stations for the other electric cars. So when they install charging stations nowadays, the fast charging stations, they put 2 or 4 or 8. So it's getting a lot better. It's great because we need to think about the future. And eventually, yes, you'll get to a charging spot where you'll have like tens, dozens of charging station because you're on the highway and you'll have like many cars stopping by, getting a coffee, going for a pee stop, and then continue on to their travels. So we're going to get to that point. We're not there yet, but that's how things are being planned right now. Now,
We have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, Simon.
One thing that's important to figure out about how complicated it could be to charge or where to charge. It's a good question. You can't pay at most charging stations. You can't use a credit card, except ChargePoint, which will accept a credit card, or in the US where you can use credit cards. In Canada, you need to have a prepaid card. So you either get a physical prepaid card that you can then charge up on the internet and put like $20 or $40, and then every time you use it, the total goes down. If you want, you can also download an application on your smartphone, and then you put some money on your account, and you can just start the session with your application. Some of them you can use your phone and bring it close to the charging station and it will start it up. I know the IGA now is using the ChargePoint charging stations, so you're allowed to use your credit card, which, you know, it just makes it so much more simple. So eventually we'll get to that point. Tesla is a little bit different. Tesla, the supercharging stations know the VIN number, the serial number of your car, which is directly linked to your credit card. So as soon as you're finished with your charging session, the amount is being deduced from your credit card directly with Teslas. You don't need to like fumble into finding out how to pay for it or find an application. It just does it automatically. Another thing, when you decide that you want to plan a long trip within the province, you know, it's pretty easy, but you still want to register with these different charging networks, whether it's Hydro-Quebec's Circuit Electrique, the electric circuit, or if you go to the charging station Flow, FLO, or ChargePoint, which ChargePoint is American, so you'll find those in the US also. You kind of need to register for all of them in case you ever need one. You get to a city and there's only a ChargePoint. Well, if you have the electric circuit charging station card, it's not going to work on the ChargePoint. There's something called interoperability of networks. And we're really pushing hard to make sure that all networks are interoperable. So if I have a ChargePoint card, well, I could be using it on electric circuit or on Flow or on other networks. Right now, it is working partially. So if you have a Flow network card or application, you could be going at electric circuit with it or to ChargePoint with it, and it'll work, and they just transfer the money between themselves. So it makes it so much easier. The electric circuit is only interoperable with Flow, but not with the other ones. Flow is also available in New Brunswick and certain parts of Ontario and Western Canada. So your best bet right now would be to use a Flow card or ChargePoint to be able to access other charging stations. The biggest one in Quebec, of course, the biggest network is the Hydro-Quebec's electric circuit. So you can't not be a member of that charging station network. It's super important. So I think that answers the question, Vincent.
This one, yes. We have another one from Sandrine. How do you register? Do you need physical cards like the Circuit Electrique? Or is it all on your phone, or can you do both?
Well, you actually really need, except for Tesla, you just need to go on the websites and register. And then they'll ask you as you registered, do you want a physical card? You might say yes or no. And depends, like I have the physical card. And it's important because when you go out in certain regions, those charging stations rely on the cellular network to contact the main network to figure out what's your account, what's your name, how much credit do you have on your account. And if it cannot communicate with it, it will not start the session. Whereas if you have a physical card and you swipe it, it'll start the session anyway, no matter how much money you have on your account, because it'll try and help you out. And eventually when cell communication comes back, it'll be able to like figure things out. So I have both. I have the cell phone with the application, and I also have physical cards just in case when I travel in areas with very poor cell communication. It's a lifesaver sometimes. There's also a way you can call, like for electric circuit, you can call CAA Quebec and ask them to start at a distance the charging station. But again, they're relying on cell coverage, and there's poor cell coverage. It's a problem. So I hope it answers charging stations and interoperability. For example, in the last 18 months, I've done over 50,000 kilometers. I've been to Gaspé, I've been to New York City, I've been to Toronto, and I've used different charging stations. And my best recommendation for you is if you're going to do a very long trip like that across provinces or across states, just look at what charging stations, which networks you'll need to be a member of in order to make your life a lot easier once you're there. So you can, like I said, pay with a credit card or with a prepaid card. Certain networks in the US will have you pay less per minute if you have a prepaid card compared to using a credit card, because they'll add the 3% or 4% charge of Visa or MasterCard onto the charge itself. There was a question here. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. Yes, myths. There's a lot of myths. People always think, is an electric car worthwhile? Is it more expensive? How does it work during wintertime? I've heard that it was more polluting. What's the reality of it? Well, the reality, as far as the environment is, there's been a lot of fake news about it. If you think that the petrol industry will just lay by the sides and just look at electric cars take over the world and they won't be able to sell any more fuel, they're not standing by. They are outputting and pushing for fake news to try and give the impression to people that electric cars are bad for the environment and that you should wait before better technology comes along, which it won't. The lithium battery technology is very good and it's here for a long while. So let's look at it. One of those myths is that a Hummer truck is less polluting than an electric car like a Nissan Leaf. Let's look at the facts. The fact is that when you create a car, whether it's an electric car, so that's the black bar that you can see here, or even for gas cars, it emits 10 tons of greenhouse gas emissions to build a car, okay, whether it's an electric car or a gas car. You have a purple bar here that you see for all electric, but not for gas cars. The purple bar is the greenhouse gas emissions from building a battery and an electric engine, electric motor. That's 4 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's true that if you buy a electric car, like a Nissan Leaf, you'll pollute more than if you buy a gas car, okay? You'll pollute 4 tons more. That means between 6 months to a year of driving an electric car as if you were still polluting with your gas car. Afterwards, in Quebec, there is no more pollution because we use renewable electricity, renewable energy to fill up that electric car with electrons. So once you're done with it, that's it. You've polluted for the whole lifespan of the car 4 tons of CO2. The average car will output 110 tons of CO2 during its lifespan because you're burning fossil fuels. And a big SUV will burn and emit 164 tons of CO2 in the atmosphere. So it depends also on for an all-electric car where you get your electricity and what the source of the electricity is from. If you're in Alberta, a lot of it is from coal production, coal burning that will create electricity. So if you own an electric car, fully electric car in Alberta, it's similar to you using a small car like a Toyota Yaris or a Honda Fit. It'll pollute as much as a small car, but you might be driving like a nice Tesla during that time, and instead of polluting for 110 tons of CO2, you'll pollute maybe 50 tons for the whole lifespan of the car. So we're lucky in Quebec, and what it means is we do need some cleaner electricity in other states and other provinces, and we're getting to that point anyway, where solar and wind power are taking over, and those thermal electrical stations are becoming less popular. We've seen it in the US where Trump mentioned that coal would be the way to go for the next few years, yet there were more coal plants shutting down in the US than there have been in the last 20 years, simply because that's the end of that era. It's getting cheaper and cheaper to have wind and solar power than it is to fire up a coal plant. So I hope that's pretty clear for you that yes, there is an extra pollution from buying an electric car, but once you start using it, especially in Quebec, then there's no more pollution. So it's very, very good. Another thing that's important is, the manufacturers are aware that they're trying to sell you a green car, and you as a consumer, you want to make sure that the car you're buying is going to be the cleanest possible. So the materials used are also going to be cleaner. For example, Nissan touted the fact that they were using those 2-liter PET bottles that we see for soft drinks to make the textile for the seats. Some of them will be using recycled materials for the soundproofing of the car itself. There's going to be a lot of things like that that are being reused so that they can decrease the amount of CO2 being emitted to make those cars. BMW is using a lot of solar power in the factory that creates the BMW i3, so that the extra pollution is being compensated by using clean power to create these cars. Somebody's asking about if these cars are more stolen. I would say not that much, and it depends which car as well. A lot of these cars are linked to a network. So you can have an application and you can start up your car. You can determine where they are with the GPS. If your teens borrowed your car, you can limit the speed of the car as well. So it's easier to find these cars nowadays because they're linked to GPS. So smart burglars will not be stealing an electric car because the car will be found. That's the bottom point, the bottom line. Another thing that people ask me is about the batteries. How long do those batteries last? Are these batteries similar to power tool batteries that are in your shed and that after 3 to 5 years, they're not as good? Or do they compare to the 12-volt battery that's in your gas car right now? Things that's important to understand. Whether it's a gas car or whether it's an electric car, there is a 12-volt battery, same size, similar, to power all the accessories in the car. And that battery in your gas car, about after 5 years, it's a lead acid battery, it's no good, and you bring it back to be recycled and you get another one for $60 or something. The electric car also has a small battery like that to control the computers and everything else. And after about 5 years, same thing, it's done with and you need to change it. But the traction battery, the main battery that gives the power to the wheels, is a 400-volt battery. It's huge. It takes up the whole floor of the car. This is worth a lot of money. It's a lithium-ion battery. You're not going to throw it away. You're not going to change it after 5 years. That would not make any financial sense. These batteries last very long. How long? The average lifespan is, and the aim for that is 765,000 kilometers. That's between 13 and 15 years. And when they get to 765,000 kilometers, they're at about 70% of the initial range that they had. So if you had a 400 kilometer range car, well, after 15 years, it'll be down to 280 kilometers of range. Maybe after 15 years, 280 kilometers of range is still good enough for you. And you might just be stopping at those fast charging stations a little bit more often when you do long trips. And maybe you'll think, well, 15 years, let's sell that battery because it can be reused for solar and power and wind power accumulation of energy. It can be used at your cottage, so you can use that battery when there's like a lightning storm or you're run out of electricity, or maybe you have solar panels at your cottage and you want to accumulate that energy to use it during the night. And that battery will be fine to do that type of work. And when you do that, well, you can just maybe get a new battery because some cars do have accidents and the car's totaled, but the battery is still very good. So you can buy a battery from a scrapyard and just like put it into your car and boom, you know, maybe 15 years it'll have like 1,000 kilometer battery that will be available, and you can just have like a brand new exciting car with that new battery. So it happens, and they're doing it right now. The Nissan Leaf in 2011 had about 130 kilometers of range, and the same car right now has the same battery size, and you can use the 2020 battery inside the 2011 car and have 350 kilometers of range. It's mind-blowing. And you know, there are shops in the province of Quebec that are doing that type of upgrade right now, upgrading the batteries. It's really fun. It's really exciting. It wasn't meant to be, so the manufacturers didn't plan it like that. But since the battery is the physically same size, you can just unscrew the old one, screw the new one in, and it actually works. They just need to change a few electronics in it, and that's pretty much it. And the other thing that you need to understand, like for the example, the electric motor is good also for 1 million kilometers, which means the battery and the electric motor will outlast the car itself, because in Canada, most cars last about 11 years because they either rust or they get into winter accident because, you know, we got really bad weather. So it's those batteries will be finding a second life when the car is out of order, and you might be getting really good money for that used car just because of the battery itself. So we talked about range earlier. How much range should you get for your electric car? Most people drive about, in Canada, 80 kilometers a day. In Quebec, it's about 65 kilometers a day. So you need to figure out how much range do you need during your day or during your week to cover it all. If you have you rent an apartment dweller, you probably need to buy a fully electric car that has a lot of range, so you don't need to charge up your car every single day. If you have two cars at home, one is gas and the other one is electric, well, you might just buy a used electric car with maybe 100 kilometers range, and whenever you're in the city, you drive around with that little electric car. And when you do need to do long trips, well, you can take your gas car. Like I said, eventually we'll get all to be using fully electric cars anyway. Most people are expecting electric cars to have 500 kilometers range before they even consider these cars. And back in 2017, all cars were pretty much at 160 kilometers, and that was ridiculous because we didn't see the year or the decade where we'd get to that point of having 500 kilometers. And like I've mentioned, 2021, most new fully electric cars have over 420 kilometers of range. So it's getting very exciting, and they're improving those lithium ion batteries on a regular basis. And, you know, we're going to get to that third generation with over 600 kilometers of range. They're already planning for extra long range batteries for 18-wheelers that, you know, do transport of merchandise and that do cross country. And they need at least 1,000 kilometers of range, and they need super fast charging stations as well, so that the charging is not going to take very long and that they can haul a lot of weight as well. So we're at that point. These batteries are also, they're aiming to have them last over 3 million kilometers. So, you know, they will last for decades and decades. The fun of driving electric, great stuff. Why do I love my electric car, and why do owners really think, wow, electric cars are fantastic and you really need to buy one? They want you to try. If your neighbor has one, they're like, you got to try my car. It's so amazing. Why is that? It's because it's so much fun to drive. If you like little sporty cars with nice acceleration, and you've driven like manual cars and you like to like downshift the car because you feel that compression of the engine, the electric car will give you those sensations, that feeling of driving a sporty car, because there's no gear change. So it's instant power. And when you release the gas, I said the gas pedal, but it's the accelerator, because there's no gas in an electric car, right? So it's important to know that when you release that accelerator, the engine will try to recuperate that energy to transform it into electricity, and it compresses the speed and it slows it down at the same time. So you get really nice feelings with that. Very low center of gravity, because the battery is in the floor between the front and the rear wheels. So the weight is properly distributed between the front and the back. So the front of the car is not heavy and the rear is very light, like most gas cars. So you get really nice grip when you take like a highway exit, and the tires like grip super well. You're not going to get like squealing or anything like that. It's good also for winter, since you have enough weight over the wheels to get good grip. So even though you might not have a fully all-wheel drive car, it's a front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, you'll still have really good traction on those winter tires. Another great thing about electric cars, you can program it to heat up in the morning. So let's say that every morning you go to work at 7 o'clock and you program your car from Monday to Friday, 7 that you leave. Well, start up the heating process maybe an hour or half an hour earlier. And if it's plugged on your house, then it'll use up the electricity from your house to heat up the car. So when you get to your car in the morning, the ice on the windows is going to be melted, the snow as well. The car is going to be at 25 degrees, 30 degrees Celsius. The steering wheel will be heated. The seats will be heated. It'll be nice and crispy and just so nice. And you'll just get into your car without your coat on and without your gloves, and you'll just leave and you'll be like smiling and looking around and being super happy. Same thing during the summertime, where you will have like a heat wave and it's super warm. You can be inside your house or inside the shopping center and use your application, smartphone application, and start up the cooling of the car so that it's nice and cool when you get into the car. So a lot of really nice advantages. Maintenance, the brakes, all cost less. Also insurance, since green cars have lesser impact on the environment. So insurance companies are all about having less impact on the environment, which right now creates a lot of droughts, forest fires, or it creates floods, and they need to pay for that. So no, the insurance business is not just about cars, it's about housing as well. And if your house is flooded all the time, not a good thing. So if they can have you drive an electric car, that will have that impact in having less important environmental damages happening as time goes on. Now, let's talk about winter, because people are afraid of winter. They think electric cars don't work during wintertime, and they do super well. Gas cars take up 20% more fuel during wintertime. Electric cars use up 20% more energy as well. You know, there's no magic. I do say that electric cars are great and fantastic, but they're not magic. They are, they work the same way as any other type of mechanical things. They will use up more electricity. It's only at a certain temperature, like minus 25 and below, that they will use up a lot more electricity to keep the cabin nice and warm. So it might use up to 40% more electricity during wintertime. What that means is you will either need to charge up your car more often during the day or during the week, or you'll need to get a bigger battery if you know that you need to do like long trips for like many times during the winter. So a lot of manufacturers offer different sizes of batteries. For a Nissan Leaf, for example, you can get the Nissan Leaf with a 40 kilowatt hour battery or the 62 kilowatt hour battery, which will give you like about 100 kilometers of range more with the bigger battery. So you have to think about winter. You might think, well, the longest, biggest trip that I take during my week is 150 kilometers. So in wintertime, since I live in Lac Saint-Jean and we hit minus 30, you know, 15, 20 days out of the winter, and I need my car to do that kind of range, well, I'll add 40% to that 150 kilometers, and I would need, you know, maybe 250 kilometers of range on my battery. So it would work well during really cold winters or just normal days of the year. Or maybe you'll think, I don't want to spend that $5,000 extra for a bigger battery. Whenever I need to, I'll just stop at a fast charging station and I'll pay $5 to charge up the car, and I'll wait and I'll just do text, or I'll watch a movie while it's charging up. So, it's a choice. You either pay up more right now to have a bigger battery, or you just stop more often at fast charging stations when the need is required. So like I was saying, 4 days a year for like Montreal or Gatineau, more in more northern areas of the province. You need to have a little bit more foresight. But one thing that's good is you will never need to boost your battery. That battery has a self-warms itself and has a thermal heater and blanket to keep itself warm, which is another thing. If you know this, at minus 15 degrees and below, the battery will self-heat itself, which is fine. It's good. It's a good thing. But if you are going to Mexico and you leave your car outside at minus 40 degrees for 2 weeks, the battery will be used up during that time. And if it's every day, day and night, minus 25, you will use up your battery. So you might make sure that when you are parking it at the airport, that's fully charged. If it's like a newer car, if you've got 400 kilometers of range, it's not really a problem. But if you've got a used car that's only got 140 kilometers of range, that battery will be worn out real quick. So you have to think about that. If you leave for Florida for 6 months and you leave your car here in the province of Quebec, just leave it plugged into 120 volt outlet so that the battery will just like top itself up as required, or will use the power of the house to warm the battery when required. And it's not going to impact your battery. It's not going to be damaging the battery at all. Cost of vehicle use. So I got a really nice chart here. It's available on our website as well. And it just shows you that, yes, initially when you do buy an electric car compared to a gas car, you might see that there's a good difference here between a Nissan Leaf and a Honda Civic. There is about, after taxes and after incentives also, there's still about $7,000 difference. And that $7,000 extra that you're paying for that electric car will be recouped pretty quickly. If you drive about 20,000 kilometers a year, after 4 years, you'll have saved about $2,000. After 6 years, about $6,500. And after 8 years of electric car use, you'll have saved $11,000 compared to if you had bought just a Honda Civic and you had paid for gas for 8 years. So those are huge amounts of money that you can save. And as we go along with time and the price of electric cars get lower, because we're expecting by 2025 that will be at price parity, which means that the same type of car, like a Kia Soul gas and Kia Soul electric, will be sold at the same price. And that's not me saying, that's KPMG that's done that ran through the numbers. So it's we'll get to that point. It's really good to know. So whether you buy it now and you get that $13,000 back from the government, or whether you wait in 5 years or 7 years to buy your electric car, overall you should be paying, in the end of it, you should be paying the same, and you're not going to be polluting anymore. So there's no need to wait. Disadvantages of all electric cars. Well, there's higher purchase price. Some areas don't have as many charging stations as we're hoping for, but that's going to change. The more cars there are on the road, the more charging stations we're installing to answer the demand. Used cars have 100, 170 kilometers of range, whereas the newer cars have up to 425 kilometers of range. So, it's pretty good, except the Teslas, which have a range from 350 to 500 kilometers, whether they're new or old or used. Some cars don't charge up as quickly at home as others, but for newer cars, it's not always the same thing. And the Model 3 like the newer version of Model 3 with the version 3 charging station supercharger can give you 120 kilometers of range after 5 minutes. And the advantages of all electric cars, they're much cheaper to drive using electricity. They generate savings pretty quickly, like we've shown before. They're better for the environment. There's less noise pollution, smaller environmental impact. Now, you might think, but what about hydrogen cars? What are the advantages of hydrogen cars? Because, you know, we keep hearing about these cars that are the future. The cars are a lot more expensive. If you look at the Toyota, I forget the name of it, the Toyota hydrogen car, or even the Hyundai small SUV that runs on hydrogen, they're about $80,000. And remember, at $55,000, you can get a nice luxury Tesla Model 3. So it's more expensive. If you fill up your electric car with electricity for 400 kilometers, it'll cost you about $5 of electricity. To do 400 kilometers of range with hydrogen, if you stop at a hydrogen station, it'll cost you about $80 of hydrogen, more than gas. To create a hydrogen fuel cell, it uses up a lot of rare earth materials that are expensive. So you need to have a battery and a fuel cell. And the fuel cell has a limited lifespan of about 7 years, whereas the battery, like we said, lasts a lot longer. The electric car, you can have your own charging station at home, and it costs very little. You cannot have hydrogen station at home. There are 3 hydrogen stations in the province of Quebec. If you install a charging station at home, electric charging station at home, the charging station is about $900. Installation is about $600. If you install a fast charging station along the highway, it costs about $35,000. If you install a gas pump, you know, at a self-service station, those gas pumps cost $13,000. So if you do gas, $13,000. If you install a fast charging station, $35,000. If you install a fuel hydrogen station, it's $4 million for one station. So how many hydrogen stations do you think we can get across the province of Quebec for all hydrogen cars? It's going to be billions of dollars. So what are the advantages of hydrogen? I'm not too sure. To do 100 kilometers, you need 4 times the electricity to create the hydrogen to put in that hydrogen car than you would if you just took that electricity and put it directly into a battery. Because to create hydrogen, it takes up a lot of electricity to create electrolysis to be able to separate water into hydrogen and oxygen. So no advantages. I don't think it's a good idea. Battery electric vehicles have advanced in technology very quickly. The only advantage of a hydrogen car is that it charges up faster in hydrogen, depending on the power of the pump, because if there's not enough power to pump that hydrogen into the tank of the car, you might only be able to fill it in half and only have 200 kilometers of hydrogen range. And it does take some time. And, you're sitting on an H-bomb also, which is not like what I wouldn't want to do for my kids. I'd rather sit on lithium than on hydrogen. it's a personal choice. So that's pretty much what I had to tell you today. I hope everyone has enjoyed this presentation. Just to remind you that my association, the Quebec Electric Vehicle Association, AVEQ, is run by volunteers. So we're pretty much all volunteers. Myself, I'm a chiropractor. And we do it because we believe that it's the right thing to do. It's a smart thing to do for Quebecers to run with electric cars, drive electric cars. It's good for the environment. It's good for your finances. It's good for the province's finances as well. And we do a lot of events across the province. We do over 100 events, and it costs a lot of money doing all of these things. So if you become a member at $49, you get your membership card, and you can get really nice deals at buying charging station or installing them, on insurance, on a lot of stuff. So please become members. We'd appreciate it. Vincent, it's all yours.
Yes, cool. Thank you very much, Mr. Rioux, for your presentation. It was inspiring. Really, I enjoyed, and I learned a lot of things, certainly about myth. So I would like to ask a question myself for you.
Sure.
What would you suggest? Like, we've seen the Soul EV and the Hyundai Kona, all those mini SUVs, and they're not competing when you look at magazines RPM with the Toyota RAV4 hybrid. It's always on the top, this one. So there's always this competition between the brands. What would you tell about those electric vehicles? Would you say like this Toyota is as good as the Kia and Hyundai ones?
Well, they're going after different consumers. The Soul and the Kona are subcompact SUVs, which means they're based onto a small car, and they put the envelope, which looks like an SUV, on top of it, but the inside is pretty small. But you're sitting a little bit higher, but you're not sitting any higher than you would if you're sitting into a Chevrolet Bolt, for example, which is a compact car. You might actually have more space inside the Chevrolet Bolt than inside the Hyundai Kona. So it's good to shop and go around and look and see what might be the best car for you. The RAV4 is only available as a plug-in hybrid. So it'll give you about 60 kilometers of range, whereas the Kona will give you over 400 kilometers range. So if you want a fully electric versus a plug-in hybrid, that's also a matter of needs and taste. The RAV4 has a lot of space. It's a well-established small SUV, but it's not a subcompact SUV. So it's got enough space. The Ford Escape plug-in hybrid offers about 40 kilometers of range. It's also similar in size to the RAV4, but since it's got a smaller battery than the RAV4, it's only accesses $6,500 worth of incentive instead of the full $13,000. So just for that aspect, it might be a better deal to go with the RAV4 Prime.
The Toyota one. Okay.
Okay.
And what about the reliability of those brands? Because in gas vehicles, we always hear about Toyota being super reliable and cheap parts, whether the other ones are more less affordable and less reliable, I would say. Is this still true, even if it's maybe not anymore?
No, electric cars are a completely different ballgame. For example, I'll give you the best one ever, Jaguar. Jaguar are nice and luxurious cars, but they've always had a very bad reputation for their engines, which have been prone to problems, a lot of problems. So people think, oh no, should I be buying a Jaguar fully electric? How's that going to be? Well, it's not the same car at all. You're not going to have the same types of problems with a Jaguar that's fully electric than with the problems that you've had with a gas engine car, because there's no more gas. So all the problems that they've had with that is not a problem anymore. Plus, Jaguar is a small manufacturer, and they use the same platform for their I-Pace as it is used for the Mercedes EQC and the Audi e-tron SUV. So these three cars, the Mercedes, the Audi, and the Jaguar, are made in the same factory, one after the other. And it's the same powertrain. They just put like a different stamping and branding on top of it. And the interior and all that is different, of course. But, you know, it's the same car made by the same people. So there's not that factor of, you know, is it going to be like a lemon or not? They're good cars. Same thing with if you look at a Kia or if you look at a Toyota, well, the battery comes from LG Chem, which is Korean. So for both, the batteries are the same. And that LG Chem is also into the Chevrolet Bolt. And a lot of parts are made by Samsung in Korea for Chevrolet. So the whole economics of it and the whole industrial aspect of it have completely changed because the good old manufacturers that we used to know, like Ford and Chrysler, they don't make the cars anymore. They assemble them and they take parts from other manufacturing superpowers like Samsung and LG and all these other companies. Panasonic that does batteries for Tesla. So it's a different ball game nowadays.
Okay, I hear. That's cool. Thank you very much. And we wouldn't have any more questions from the public unless I give some time for it. Um,
I think
Maybe
we've
myself.
done pretty good. It was pretty full today. We
Yeah,
answered a lot of those questions, and it was a good webinar today.
good session. All
Good
right.
questions.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and experience with us, and thank you for all the participants that's been here. The webinar is coming to an end, but before we leave, we invite you to uh, like the Credo page and the Crégime page because the registered webinar, will be available on their platforms and websites. You can also send an email to info@runningelectric.ca if you have any more questions after the webinar. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and it was part of the Running Electric campaign. We remind you, and it's a campaign coordinated by Equiterre with the support of Transition Énergétique Quebec. Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you, Mr. Rioux.
Thank you.